Special agents. My first 48 hours in the hospital are a blur. I don't know what they gave me for pain, but I slept almost around the clock. They kept the lights off in my room unless needed, because I was still photophobic. It was the evening of my last night in the hospital. I describe my condition as marginally okay. Hopefully well enough to go home in the morning. The CO gave me a week off duty to regain my strength. I needed every minute of it. A nurse opened my door and 2 men in business suits followed her in. She ignored them and walked over to my bed and said, "Dr. Sanders ordered something to help you rest tonight. You'll be going home in the morning." She held a syringe and said she was going to give me something for pain. I could use it. Every bone in my body still hurt. At least the itching had abated. The older of the 2 gentlemen intercepted her. He said, "If that's going to sedate him, it'll have to wait. We're from OSI and need to ask Sergeant Lovelace a few questions. This won't take long. Shut the door on your way out." She was out like a shot and I didn't get my pain medicine. The instant the door was closed, the older guy flipped on the overhead lights. It felt like I had sand in my eyes. The OSI is the investigative arm of the USAF security police. They are to the Air Force what NCIS is to the Navy. They carried themselves like Gestapo. "Sir, can you turn off the lights? Please. They hurt my eyes. We need to see what we're doing, son. We can't talk to you in the dark." "This won't take long. I just have a couple questions," he said. They introduced themselves as special agents from the OSI. They were all business and scared the hell out of me with their affect and demeanor. They showed me their badges. Since they wore civilian clothes, I inspected their credentials just long enough to catch their rank. The older guy was a major and his companion was a captain. Each man grabbed a chair and they sat on opposite sides of the bed close to my head. The older guy commandeered control of my tray table and moved everything off the top. He slid it over my lap while his partner raised the head of my bed to a sitting position. I'm fuzzy about the captain's name, but I can clearly remember the older guy. He introduced himself as Special Agent Gregory. Agent Gregory was in charge and did most of the talking. The captain introduced himself as Special Agent something. He set up a small reel-to-reel tape recorder on my tray table. He crossed his legs and balanced a notepad on his knee. He said very little but paid keen attention. Special Agent Gregory spoke first. "Sergeant Lovelace, I'll be the special agent in charge of your case." "Yes, sir," I said. But I thought to myself, I have a case? What the hell does that mean? Did we burn down the forest? I knew the reputation of the OSI for being tough guys. I dared ask, "Agent Gregory, sir, am I in trouble?" He replied, "Son, you're asking me if you're in trouble? Would Webe hear if you weren't in trouble?" His reply amused the captain. My stomach turned. I caught the sarcasm in his tone. I sized him up as someone not to mess with. He wore a flat-top haircut and had the chiseled square jaw look. His pistol was visible inside his unbuttoned suit coat. Special Agent Gregory explained, "Sergeant Lovelace, we need to talk to you right now while everything is fresh in your mind. Do you understand? I know you're sleepy, but you need to stay alert. It's important that you answer my questions honestly and thoroughly. Do you understand me, Sergeant?" I nodded. Agent Gregory rolled his eyes. I saw he was annoyed, but I didn't know why. He took a laminated playing card from his breast pocket and put on some reading glasses. They rested on the very tip of his nose, so heckled C over the top. He read my rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, also known as the UCMJ. He recited them like he'd read them 1,000 times. The tone and tenor of his voice betrayed his distaste for the task. He took off his glasses and carefully put them away when he'd finished. Without eye contact he asked, "Do you understand what I've told you?" Once more I nodded and once more, he looked annoyed. Now he raised his voice, "Son, don't answer me with a nod of your head or a shrug off your shoulders. The captain here can't put that down in his notes and the tape recorder can't pick it up. Do you get it now? Now speak up." "Yes, sir, now I understand," I said apologetically. Reaching into his briefcase, Agent Gregory pulled out a manila folder and a few papers. On my tray table he carefully laid out 6 forms. He instructed me, "Son, these are waiver and consent forms. You're waiving your rights and giving us your consent for certain things. You're promising to cooperate fully and honestly with our investigation. You have the right to an attorney if you'd like. You can hire your own lawyer, or the JAG will appoint someone to represent you. You said you understood your rights. Do you understand them, or shall I read them to you again?" "Yes, sir and no sir," I said. I believe he was intentionally mixing his questions, so they required mixed yes and no responses. It made the process difficult to follow. Probably an interrogation technique taught at the Gestapo Academy. Agent Gregory picked up where he left off. By signing these consent forms, you give us permission to conduct a search of your home and your car. We have your permission to seize anything we find without first securing a search warrant. We look for things such as contraband or anything that could be evidence of a crime. You don't have anything to hide from us, do you, son? No, sir, I said. I felt like voicing an objection would make me sound evasive or uncooperative. I was afraid of this guy. Let's be clear. You understand what I've said, and you are fine with all of it? I spoke up this time. Yes, sir. Good, said Gregory, obviously pleased with himself. He used his finger to show me where to sign. I need your signature here and here, sign here and here and here in the last one. I also need your initials here on the left. Very good, very good. Well done, Sergeant. I signed everything. I never read a single word of it. My eyes were still nearly swollen shut. Reading them would have been impossible. His explanations were woefully inadequate for a young and naive NCO. Gregory swooped up the forms and returned them to his manila folder. Projecting his voice in the direction of the tape recorder, Agent Gregory said, "This is Special Agent Gregory, in the matter of Sergeant Terry J. Lovelace, 351st Strategic Missile Wing." While he spoke, I closed my eyes because of the pain. I guess he thought I was falling asleep. Gregory startled me by shouting, "Pay attention. Stay with me and don't forget to speak up when you answer my questions." Got it, son? Yes, sir, I understood him all right. I dared to ask a question. Sir, is there a way we could do this after I've had some more sleep? They paused for a moment and looked at each other. I think they were amused. Scowling at me, Agent Gregory said, "Look, Sergeant, I've already explained why we need to talk now. Are you rescinding your agreement to cooperate now?" I said, "No, sir, you just what, son?" I read your rights and explained them. You claim to understand them. You signed consent forms and waivers. Nobody twisted your arm or threatened you. Do you want me to tear these papers up now? If you'd like, we can stop right this minute and we'll see each other again at your court-martial, replied Gregory. No, sir, yes, sir, I'll cooperate, sir. The words court-martial evoked all kinds of scenarios. None of them were good. Excellent. While all of this is fresh in your memory, we want to get to the truth. The doctors want us to help them find an explanation for what's happened to you and your friend, he said. Yes, sir. I was just asking. I want to cooperate. I'll answer your questions, sir. I didn't want him to think I was hiding something. All right. So, Sergeant Lovelace, you agree to answer my questions now fully and honestly? Yes, sir, I said, raising my voice to satisfy him. You and Senior Airman Tobias went on a camping trip to Devil's Den Park and Nature Preserve in northern Arkansas. That wildlife preserve is federal land. Did you know that? He said in an ominous voice, emphasizing federal land. No, sir. But I thought, so what? What's the big deal? Gregory asked. Did you and Tobias stay at the park last night? No, sir, I said in the belief he was referring to the campgrounds and not the park in general. Gregory went ballistic, like bloody hell. Then where'd you stay? The Hilton. You didn't buy a camping permit and you didn't stay at the campgrounds. The park rangers found your abandoned campsite deep inside that nature preserve. If you're going to lie to me, I'll hang your ass, son. His face was red and the veins in his neck stood out. Many years later, in retrospect, I think his rage was all theater. He set me up by asking multiple questions requiring yes and no responses. It was one of his ways to assert dominance and establish who was in charge. I said as earnestly as possible, yes, sir. I misunderstood. I thought by park you were referring to the campgrounds. No, sir, honestly, I misunderstood you. We didn't buy a permit and we didn't stay in the campgrounds either. But yes, we went into the wildlife area. All of the maps and directions showing where we went are still in the glove box off my car. With a nod from Gregory, the captain stood up and left the room. Agent Gregory knew I was sufficiently intimidated. He said, son, I'll let that slide one time because you just might be that damn stupid. The park rangers found your campsite. You left behind a blanket that was marked property of the USAF alongside your government-issued DEET and sunscreen. Your buddy left his little camera and a backpack with his name and address on it. It wasn't too hard to track you two down. I understand, sir, I said. I was sure there had to be more to this story. I knew it had to do with what we witnessed and experienced in that damn meadow. This was about the thing we saw. I'll be damned if I'd tell him what we saw. I remembered what happened when I told people about seeing a flying saucer. Gregory asked me with honest curiosity, son, there are a dozen state parks within an hour's drive or less from here. Why would you drive half a day to go camping for 2 nights? I explained, sir, Toby suggested Devil's Den. The location washi's idea. I have a camera with a telephoto lens and a tripod. I hope to get pictures of wildlife and some scenic shots. Toby is an amateur astronome and he wanted to watch the stars. Devil's Den has some high ground. We found a summit in the preserve that gave Toby a good view of the night ski and it gave me panoramic scenery in all directions. So, you and your buddy trespassed into the nature preserve and set up a camp. According to Tobias, you guys saw some stars that looked funny. Then you just went inside the tent and fell asleep around midnight. Is that right? He asked. Yes, sir, it sounded suspicious the way he phrased it. He continued, then you got up and left at 3 o'clock in the morning. You got in your car and just left? Is that correct? Yes, sir, I know that sounds odd. Did you plan on coming back the next day? That's the only reason to leave everything behind. Do you have a little marijuana plot out there or something? I was shocked. My mind was racing. What if someone had a little weed garden out there? That could mean very big trouble if they tried to pin it on us. No sir, we didn't plan to come back for anything, and Wezer didn't have any marijuana. Gregory asked. That's just odd. Don't you think? You two leave all your gear and abandon your campsite. Then after just 3 hours of sleep, you drive halfway across the state of Missouri? Yes, sir, I guess it does sound crazy, sir. Gregory shifted gears. Crazy? You and your buddy saw some lights in the sky? Airman Tobias said you saw 3 lights that looked like stars. What did you see out there, son? Sir, I saw the same thing. 3 lights that looked like stars, I said. Gregory asked. How long did the two of you lay there and just watch these stars? About 3 hours, sir. Looking shocked he yelled, 3 hours. Now think real hard and tell me exactly how many photographs of these stars you took during those 3 hours. I replied truthfully, none, sir. We just watched them and then went to bed. Gregory looked puzzled. He said, you what? You see something unusual and you didn't take a photograph? Everybody in your squadron says you're a photography nut and you didn't take a picture of something you thought was odd. Something Tobias said was almost over your heads. Now I was certain these guys had interrogated Toby. I had no way of knowing what he told Gregory and his sidekick. I tried to explain, sir, we just watched them for a couple hours and then we went to bed inside the tent. The stars were still up there when we turned in. We went to sleep around midnight. Gregory scribbled some notes. After a long pause he asked, son, what were you planning to do on this trip exactly? You two want to look at the stars and take tourists' pictures during the day? You could have stayed at the campground with hot showers and still have done all those things. Sir, I was hoping for some nature shots like wooded scenery and eagles. Gregory asked, and just how many shots of eagles and scenery did you take? None, sir. It was obvious he didn't believe me. I could read it in his face. Let's try again, son. Tell me what you and Airman Tobias plan to do inside this nature preserve? Sir, yes. We planned on hiking and doing some wildlife photography. I've got a 35mm camera with a good telephoto lens, I said. I felt uneasy now. I knew where this was headed, and I wasn't looking forward to telling him. Sarcastically, Gregory asked, so what do you photograph with this telescopic lens of yours when you're not trespassing onto federal land or bumbling around in a nature preserve? I wasn't even sure it was a question. Sir, it's a telephoto lens, not a telescopic lens, I said. I immediately realized it was a mistake to correct him. He was furious. Telly, what the hell? For some reason you're just not going to tell me what you photographed. I need your camera and all film. Sir, I can have my wife bring it. He interrupted me and shook his head. Unless you have film and a camera hidden somewhere, forget it. We're conducting a raid on your home and car right now. So just tell me, where's the camera and the film you took on the trip? All I need is that roll of film. I left it at home, sir. It's sitting on my kitchen counter, unless my wife moved it. I didn't take a single picture because I forgot the goddamn camera. They're searching my home and my car? Did I hear him correctly? I asked. Sir, you're searching my house and my car, right now? Don't look so surprised, Sergeant Lovelace. You just signed a consent form. You gave us your permission. I want your film and the camera you took on the trip. We'll develop your film for you. I just want to see what you've been photographing with this telescopic lens of yours. Sir, I lost my train of thought as the captain came back into the room. He pulled up his chair and popped open his briefcase. Security policemen had already searched my home. They took my camera, film and all my prints. They took our car and scared the holy hell out of my poor wife. From his briefcase, the captain retrieved Toby's hand-drawn map on the tourist map we snagged at a kiosk. He handed them to Gregory, who put on his reading glasses and carefully inspected both for a moment. Gregory placed them on the tray table in front of me and said, Sergeant Lovelace, you're going to help me make sense of this. Explain these to me. Sir, that's the map Toby drew so we wouldn't get lost trying to find our way out of the nature preserve when it was time to go home. Thesis the tourist's map we picked up near the visitors center. The hand-drawn map shows our route inside the nature preserve. It picks up where the park's map ends, I said. Show me, Gregory demanded. I placed the two maps side by side and used his pen to point. Sir, here's where we left the park. Then we crossed here and drove into the wildlife area. We looked for a good open place to set up camp. Here is the high plateau where we stayed. It's a big open field. I call it a meadow. He handed me a blank sheet of paper from his legal pad. Draw the shape of the meadow for me as if you were looking down on it from above. Then draw a line to show where you drove into the meadow. Got it? Yes, sir, I said. It took just a second. Now draw a large arrow to point north and draw a little box where you parked the car. Try to keep it to scale as much as you can. Here, sir, this area is all grass. Right here is where we parked my car and the arrow points north. Gregory was pleased. His instructions continued. Now draw a little circle where you set up your tent and show me where the tree line starts. Yes, sir. Now, estimate the meadow's length and width for me. Sir, I'm not good at estimating distance, I confessed. Just use the length of your car. Use the car like the scale on a map. Just give me your best estimate, he said. It took a couple minutes. This is it, sir. I handed back his pen and my drawing. Gregory studied it and stuck it in his folder with the maps and papers I signed. Then he turned his attention to the captain again. You get this camera and film? Yeah, we got a 35mm camera. It had a fresh roll of film in it but no exposures. We seized 3 unopened boxes of film. All black and white and all are high resolution. One is infrared made specially for use in poorly lit conditions or at night. They were all bought at the base exchange. The receipt is in the bag. There was nothing there under his name for pickup. I checked. Gregory turned back to me now. Son, what kind of wildlife or scenic photography uses high-resolution black and white film? What kind of scenery were you planning to photograph in the dark? You're going to Javi to explain that one to me too. I did my best to explain, sir. I read a book from the library about Ansel Adams. He was a famous photographer 75 years ago. He's famous for his black and white prints of desert scenes and mountains. Black and white film makes high-quality outdoor prints. I use it mostly to photograph eagles in the moon. The captain rejoined the conversation. We have every negative that was in the house. We got the wife's camera. It's a cheap 35mm. It was in a bedroom drawer with 7 exposures. We're processing that roll now. It should be ready in an hour. Very good. Gregory smiled. The captain continued. Sergeant Lovelace has a darkroom set up. It's in the rear bedroom. We took all the negatives and prints. He seems fascinated with the full moon for some reason. We've got a dozen prints or so here. I thought you'd find them interesting. But not a single roll of exposed film. Gregory's response was harsh and immediate. Sergeant, where's the film from your trip? Sir, I left my camera at home. When we were in the meadow, I didn't have a camera. I don't believe you, son, and that's a big problem. Do you get it? I think you have a roll of film stashed somewhere. I don't understand why you need a darkroom either. Why don't you develop your film at the base exchange like everyone else? Gregory asked. Sir, it's a cheap hobby if you develop your own prints. Plus, you can crop and enlarge images in the dark room and do all kinds of things. Gregory wasn't dumb, he knew that already. He had more knowledge about photography than he let show. Before Gregory could ask Guy's next question, the nurse returned. She had a syringe in her hand and a look of determination on her face. Doctor Sanders wants Sergeant Lovelace to have his medication. I can bring the doctor down here if you like, she said with authority. OSI agents may be tough guys, but they're no match for a registered nurse. No need. I think we're about done here. I don't think Sergeant Lovelace has much more to add. He was annoyed by the interruption. The nurse gave me an injection and left. Gregory turned his attention back to me. He didn't appear angry. He spoke calmly and asked, Sergeant, where is the film? I need the negatives for every single photograph you took since you crossed the Arkansas border. Sir, I don't have any, I said. Without telegraphing their move, both men abruptly stood and killed the tape recorder. They packed up their things and moved toward the door. I was relieved. Before he left the room, Gregory told me, you're being reassigned but you'll be staying at Whiteman. You'll be reassigned and work in a support section. Those orders will be cut today, but of course, that's all subject to change. Yes, sir. I thought, thank God. I get to finish my enlistment here, unlike Toby, and I'm not handcuffed to the bed. Gregory continued, "You were ordered not to leave the base without permission from your CO or myself. You will not speak with Senior Airman Tobias or his family. You will not communicate with them in any way. That means no notes or letters. You will not discuss this incident with anyone at your new duty station or disclose the reason for your reassignment. Are you with me, son?" "Yes, sir." "I understand." He added, "Don't attempt to contact Tobias through a third party either. That means your wife or anyone else. You will not talk about the lights you saw in the sky that night. Not to anyone. That means not your wife, not your priest, or your mother, no one. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir. I understand everything," I said. Then he paused. His demeanor changed and for a minute he just stared at me. Then he lowered his voice to a whisper, "You two knuckleheads stumbled onto something that made you very sick and I think you know what it was." "Oh, I think you know what I'm talking about, don't you, son?" "I know you do." "Yes, sir," was all I could add. "If you come across that other camera or if you have something you want to tell me, just pick up the phone." He dropped a business card on my tray table. "There's my number, call me." Then he smiled and even killed the overhead lights as he left. "Strange guy," I muttered as the door shut behind him. A short while later my wife arrived. Tearful and overwhelmed by the raid on our home and our car being seized. I held her. I should say we held one another. She had news too. Tammy called me. They're being reassigned. They don't even know when or where. She told me not to call her or come over. She said it was an order. Unbelievable. They sure as hell don't want us to compare our stories. To reassign Toby was just insane. To reassign me to a support unit was insane too, but far less harsh. I couldn't reconcile my feelings. I didn't want anything to do with Toby or Tammy, ever. My feelings about Toby had changed. You'd think two people with a shared experience like this would be together and supportive of one another. It was the kind of event that bonds people. It wasn't supposed to distance us. But it did. I gave her our good news, I'm being reassigned to a support unit. That's a disappointment, but I can finish out my enlistment here. I think the idea is to keep Toby and me separated until he ships out. Once he's gone, I'm hoping to go back to work in the She was relieved too. But she shared my anxiety. "Terry, I know you probably want to say goodbye to Toby. But they warned us. We're not supposed to have any contact with them. I'm afraid of these OSI people. Please cooperate and don't piss them off. Sheila, I promise I'll cooperate with them. Don't worry, this will blow over. I promise." My feelings about Toby had changed radically. I felt it in the car on our way home. I couldn't understand it. I felt relieved that Toby was leaving. He's a bad memory gone. I didn't want to see Toby again ever, except for a quick goodbye and "nice knowing you." I would see Toby one last time despite my feelings. I'd violate Gregory's order of no contact. I'd risk going to jail to say goodbye to a man I wanted nothing to do with. It made no sense. As I was being discharged from the hospital, one of the doctors stopped by. It was the older doctor who wanted me to have the chest x-ray. He sat on my bed and told me what to expect after I'm released from the hospital and clear up some loose ends. "Sergeant, you're being reassigned to a support unit. They really don't have a spot for you yet, but they'll keep you busy, I'm sure." That was disappointing news, but Agent Gregory told me it was coming. "Sir, why can't I just go back to work in the The higher-ups asked us to find you something else to do until Tobias is off base. You're not going to re-enlist. You're just running the clock until your enlistment's up. Do you want to stay in the and work the night shift again with a new partner?" "Yes, sir, I'm a good EMT and I love my job. I'm an asset to the squadron. Maybe when things settle down you can get back to us. Your COWA's sorry to learn you're being reassigned. We'll see if we can get you back on an ambulance before your enlistment's finished. But meanwhile, I have a few things I want you to know." "Yes, sir." "Keep your nose clean and your mouth shut, and everything will be okay. Just stay out of trouble and you have nothing to worry about. Tobias told us you guys were drinking out there. The burns that you two suffered were from exposure to the sun and from naturally occurring radiation in the limestone bluff. You guys laid right on top of a uranium deposit, probably with your shirts off. Now, the world doesn't need to know that. The red spots were chigger bites from lying in the grass and not using enough DEET. Understand, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you. Now it makes sense. That made no sense at all. What kind of idiot does this guy think I am? That's the biggest load of crap I ever heard." The doctor babbled on, "I want you to know, both you guys were pretty sick when you came back. Tobias got it worse than you did. We gave you some strong medication. It can cause you to have funny dreams and affect your memory. Even months from now, a funny dream might pop up. It's just a side effect from the medication. If you don't discuss them with anyone, they'll go away fast. Yes, sir. I understand. I'm not supposed to discuss my dreams. We must have seen something important. Something secret. They know Toby and I were abducted by aliens along with a score of other poor soul sand used as lab rats. That was the only thing that made sense to me. Don't mess around with these OSI people either. You hear me, Sergeant? The doctor added. Yes, sir, loud and clear. I understand and thank you, sir. I was discharged from the hospital and sent home with a bucketful of pills along with strict instructions on how to take them. I asked Nurse Deborah, "Hey Deb, what the hell are these pills? What are they for?" She hesitated. "I'm not sure, Terry. They aren't from our pharmacy. They were sent here from Wright-Patterson," she said. I knew Deb well. She wanted to tell me more but chose not to. Rank may have been an issue too. She wore a silver bar on her collar. Every evening, they sent a nurse to our home. Her demeanor was formal, almost businesslike. She never once asked how I felt. It was her job to count the capsules to make sure I had taken my daily dose of 9, 3 with each meal. They wanted to be certain I took them as directed. These were odd generic-looking capsules. I worked in a hospital. I had a recent edition of a physician's desk reference or PDR at home. The book has color photographs of every single capsule approved by the FDA. These capsules weren't listed anywhere. That meant they were specially made by a pharmacist. But from Wright-Patterson? What was their purpose? I wish I'd saved just one capsule. Once I was home, my memory began to suddenly fail me. I couldn't remember the simplest things. I would misplace my watch and a dozen other things out of character for me. Even the day of the week was suddenly a mystery. Sheila was worried about my mental state. Then she made a connection. Taking the capsules coincided with my rapidly deteriorating memory. I had taken just 3 of the 14 days prescribed. Sheila deduced the capsules were the cause of my memory loss. I stopped taking them immediately and only saved enough pills to satisfy the Norsevening pill count. I flushed 3 capsules down the toilet after every meal in case she came early. I wanted the pill count to jive. That routine lasted 11 days. My memory improved in a week and fully returned in a month. I wonder if Toby had been poisoned by those capsules. Our car was returned after just 2 days. It had been detailed beyond belief. My old Impala had not been so clean since it left the assembly line in Detroit. It had been scrubbed inside and out. We were grateful to have the car back, but I never understood why they took my car. At least not at the time. A month after my release from the hospital, we drove past Toby's house. Not intentionally. We were on our way home from the grocery store and it was the most convenient way home. I was more concerned about running into Toby at the dry cleaners or the grocery store than at his home. Sheila was driving, and we were 2 blocks from Toby's house. Despite being ordered to have no contact, I pleaded with Sheila, "Please, park so I can say a quick goodbye. I won't be a minute. I promise it'll be okay. I'll be right back." Sheila was afraid to stop but relented when I begged. She pulled over and parked in front of Toby's house. "Terry, hurry, please hurry," she begged. There was a moving van in their driveway. Movers were busy hustling in and out with boxes almost at a trot. The front door was wide open. "Sit tight, baby. Everything's fine. I just want a quick goodbye and I'm done." I gave her a peck on the cheek and walked up the short sidewalk to Toby's front door. Without knocking, I walked inside like I'd done 100 times before. I met Tammy just as she rounded a corner with a lamp in her hand. Surprised, she glared at me with a hard look. "You shouldn't be here." She kept walking. She was angry. She probably thought it was my fault they were being uprooted so abruptly. I understood her anger. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'm responsible for whatever happened to Toby and this was all my fault somehow. Maybe that's why it was so important for me to see him on last time. Toby heard our brief exchange, as he rounded the corner. He was shocked to see me. He looked like hell. An embrace seemed appropriate, but we shook hands. He said, "I guess you heard we're reassigned." This moment in my life, those few seconds are in my mind like the birth of my children. Not in a joyous way, but it was significant. "I just want to wish you goodbye." "I wish you good luck." Toby looked me in the eye and said very softly, "Do you remember? Did it all really happen, Terry, all of it?" Before I could answer Toby's question, Tammy brushed past us in the hallway again. I'm certain she intentionally interrupted our conversation. I broke from his gaze and looked down at my shoes. Toby smelled off alcohol and his eyes were bloodshot. His question shook me to my core. Just seeing Toby again and hearing his voice triggered anxiety. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to turn and run. I knew what I had to say, and I owed him that much. I told him, "Yeah, it really happened, Toby, all of it, and they hurt us. I don't know why, but it's real, my brother." You're not going mad. That was it. I never re-engaged his eyes. I turned and stumbled back to the car without looking back. That was the last I would ever see of Toby. I had no way to know what lay ahead for him. Strangely, while I was attending law school 45 minutes away, Toby was dying on the streets of Flint, Michigan. Had I known, maybe I could have done something. Survivor's guilt? I wish we could have reconnected. But Toby wasn't to be found. Sometimes people choose not to be found. Toby had vanished. As I exited through Toby's front door, I was horrified to see 2 security policemen in a marked car were parked out front. I had been inside for less than 4 minutes. They were parked right on our ass, too. There was a pickup truck parked in front of us, so they had us boxed in. I hopped in the car. Sheila was in a panic and crying. What should I do? Oh my God, Terry, they're going to arrest us. No way. We'd be in handcuffs right now if they wanted us. You're going to calm down. You're a good driver. This is no worse than parking in downtown St. Louis. Just take your time and wiggle out of this space. Take us home, baby, you can do this. Just remember to be calm. They are still in their car. Just take a slow deep breath and you can do this. I wasn't about to ask the cops to back up. When I saw their faces in the mirror, they were laughing at us. Now calmer, Sheila slowly extracted us. She went forward and back a couple times and then we were free. We drove home. Our house was only a few blocks from Toby's. The 2 cops rode our ass all the way home. They were light rally inches from our rear bumper. Careful not to exceed the posted 20 mph speed limit, we crawled home. She hit her blinker and we pulled into the driveway. Sheila let out an audible sigh. The cops parked at the curb directly in front of our house. They watched us. I grabbed the groceries while Sheila unlocked the front door. I called, hear the phone ringing. I dropped the groceries on the kitchen table, and I grabbed the phone. Hello. Hi, Sergeant Lovelace. This is Special Agent Gregory with the Office of Special Investigations. He sounded uncharacteristically pleasant. Yes, sir. Well, you just couldn't do it, could you? You had to risk it all and violate a direct order from a superior officer. Violating an order is a serious offense, son. It really pisses me off when someone in uniform disobeys an order of mine. I'm sorry, sir. I wondered if the guys in the police car out front were going to arrest me. Maybe arrest both of us. You're just dying to exchange uniforms, aren't you? Exchange uniforms? I don't understand, sir. Do you prefer your blue uniform, or would you like to exchange it for something with black and white stripes? No, sir? It took a second or two for his words to register. Then I knew what he meant. He was talking about a prison uniform. Son, what did you and Tobias talk about? What did you give him to keep for you? Did you find that other camera yet? No, sir, and nothing, sir. Watch your ass, Lovelace. We're watching yours. I think you need a new hobby. Instead of photography, how about stamp collecting? That would suit you. Then he just hung up. The security policemen sat in front of our home for about an hour. Then they left. Thankfully, nothing ever came of it. But every day afterward, I faced the worry of being arrested. After the phone call from Gregory, I realized this whole thing was eating me up inside. I thought maybe if I offered to take a polygraph test, we could end this thing. I had nothing to hide, at least as far as a second camera and film. I hadn't photographed the things we saw. I didn't know it at the time, but it was a stupid idea that likely would have cost me dearly. I fumbled through my wallet and found Agent Gregory's business card. I called him expecting to get the switchboard, but my call went right to his desk. He answered on the first ring. This is Special Agent Gregory. Good morning, sir. This is Staff Sergeant Lovelace. I just had a thought, sir. I could take a lie detector test for you. Sir, I can prove I haven't hidden anything or done anything wrong except going into the true to form. Special Agent Gregory cut me off. He was blunt. You got some film for me yet? I'm waiting. I didn't answer. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about. The clock's ticking son, and I got my own lie detector. He must have slammed the receiver down. The conversation only raised my anxiety. Recuperating at home gave me time to rest. At Sheila's urging, I sat down and journaled everything that had happened. I began with the start of the camping idea. Bits and pieces of my memory faded a little each day, and it was a struggle to get everything on paper. It was a race to get it all down before it evaporated. It was difficult to grab a pen and paper when I just woke up from a nightmare screaming. I wasn't as disciplined as I thought. It was my wife's patient but firm resolve to see that whatever I saw in the dream made its way into the journal. Sometimes, it was only images. I drew them as best I could. Then it was time to return to work. I reported to my new duty station on time and looking my best. I was pleased that my new commanding officer seemed like a reasonable guy, as officers go. He said, "We don't have a spot for you as a medic. We're a support unit, but our first sergeant's a good man. He'll keep you busy." "Yes, sir. May I ask where I'll be assigned?" "That will be up to Roy. Around here our first sergeant is known as Roy. Also, I am lifting your travel restriction effective immediately." "Thank you, sir." That was good news at least. I was dismissed. I strolled down the hallway to the door marked, First Sergeant, Roland Gilbert. I'd prefer Roy over Roland any day. I knocked once and was told to enter. His office was closet size. He introduced himself as, First Sergeant Gilbert. Okay. I'll call the guy First Sergeant Gilbert until he tells me otherwise. He was a rail-thin man. His expressions and mannerisms could best be described as cold fish. He was anything but welcoming. I wasn't expecting a welcome party. But I didn't expect to be treated like a pariah either. He told me I'd be working the day shift. I guess since I had declined to re-enlist, I would spend the rest of my time counting days on my calendar and drinking coffee. Anyone who has ever served in the armed forces knows how important coffee is to the overall running of things. My new coworkers avoided me like a leper. Roy was sure to assign me to a task that kept me isolated from the rest of the squadron. Sounding chipper now, Roy said, "Lovelace, I have a few things that need to be done. Follow me." Without a word, we walked outside. Behind the main facility was a large garage. It was once used as a workshop of some kind. There was an old wood lathe in a corner and still sawdust on the floor. It had been a carpentry shop at one time, but it looked like it had been abandoned since the Korean War. Handing me a key, he said, "Here is your key to the kingdom. Don't lose it." "Lovelace, see that stack of plywood there?" "Yes, I see it." Damn, I wasn't blind, and I hated being addressed by last name. "I need you to spray paint 34 by 8-foot sheets of plywood. Paint both sides. Use the white paint in the corner and take your time. Do a good job." I didn't question the purpose. My instructions continued. "Lovelace, you can take an hour for lunch between noon and 1 p.m. Lock up while you're gone. At 4:30 you can call it a day and go home. I'm very busy. Let me know when you're done. Otherwise, I don't need to hear from you, understood? Just come and go as needed inside the shop. If you have any questions, now is the time to address them." "No, Sergeant." I think I got it. Unbelievable. I was an exceptional EMT with skills learned by years of experience in the field. There were any number of productive things I could do. Now, I'm painting plywood? Maybe it was because I had Agent Gregory still on my ass? It didn't make sense. I'd come to expect things not to make sense. The spray paint was old and very low quality. It took several coats of paint to cover the bare wood. It took weeks. When I was finished, and everything was dry, I reported to the first sergeant's office. I knocked on Roy's door. "Lovelace. Come in. How's your project coming?" he asked. "I wrapped it up today." "Would you like to see?" I asked. "Oh yeah, let's go see what they look like." His enthusiasm was disingenuous. He walked with me in silence to the workshop. After 10 minutes of inspection, he pointed out a spot or two where the paint had run. It really was insignificant. "Very good, Lovelace. Not too bad. Thanks, Sergeant. Do you have anything else I could do for the unit? Hopefully something a little more cerebral." He pretended to think for a moment, rubbing his chin. Yes, Ito. "Now, strip them down to bare wood. Sandpaper is on the workbench." He turned and walked away. I understood him loud and clear.